Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of Congregational Humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. I'm David Breeden, Senior Minister. Welcome. John Stuart Mill is known today as one of the founders of our contemporary form of liberalism. In 1859, he published a book that he had written with his philosopher wife, Harriet Taylor Mill, who died the year before the book's publication. The book on liberty from 1859 is still considered the foundation of liberal political and social thought. Mill was the archetypal liberal, concerned with women's rights, animal rights, individual rights in general, and etc. And he was what nowadays we would call a secular humanist. Mill was what our conservative friends call a social justice warrior, as a matter of fact, through and through. Since his thought is so central to liberal ideals, I think it's important to consider his great crisis of meaning and purpose. In his autobiography, he wrote about this shattering question in the moment when he asked himself this question. Suppose that all your objects in life were realized, that all the changes in institutions and opinions which you are looking forward to could be completely effected at this very instant. Would this be a great joy and happiness to you? And, he says, an irrepressible self-consciousness distinctly answered, no. At this, he says, my heart sank within me. The whole foundation on which my life was constructed fell down. All my happiness was to have been found in the continual pursuit of this end. The end had ceased to charm, and how could there ever again be any interest in the means? I seemed to have nothing left to live for. End quote. Now, seriously, it's not a bad question to ask, even though we all know that justice will never actually be achieved on our planet. Forget about that for a moment and ask yourself, what is my meaning and purpose besides the struggle for justice? Or, perhaps more to the point, why do you go to church besides justice and social justice work? Now, I'll come back to John Stuart Mill's answer to this question in a few minutes. And today I want to consider the courage that it takes to be confused, or at least to admit your confusion. Now, this state of confusion is, I think, central to what being a liberal means. I think you have to be confused if you're a liberal. Sure, we all know that it's part of toxic masculinity never to ask any questions and never to admit you're wrong. And if we're honest, I think that's a human problem, actually. So, how do we be less toxic? And yes, I admit my bias up front. I see the practice of liberalism as a way of being less toxic. So, let's start with the big picture. There's a lot of debate about where the idea of liberalism even comes from. If you want to take a serious look at the question, a good place to start is the lost history of liberalism from ancient Rome to the 21st century by Dr. Helena Rosenblatt, who's a professor of history at the City University of New York. The broad parameters of liberalism are not difficult. I know you can probably say them in your sleep. Equality before the law, representative government, freedom of speech, separation of church and state. These quickly become meaningless platitudes, however. So I want to take a concrete example. Religion Dispatches is a liberal religious online magazine that keeps up with various trends in religion in the United States. And the headlines from October 3rd of last week looked like this. The elite movement laying the foundation for a Make America Great Again that will outlast Trump and remake America inside NatCon Part 1. And yeah, there is a Part 2 that's even a little more scary. By the way, you see there another article, Evangelicalism thrived because it enabled white Christians to avoid civil rights movements, according to New Book. So you get the editorial bent of this particular online publication. So let's take a peek at the article about the elite new NatCon. The article says this: the array of voices clustered under the NatCon banner align around a number of goals and priorities. These include a near-total moratorium on immigration, whether documented or not, a robust Christian nationalism to dominate the public square, a rollback of LGBTQ rights, economic nationalism and opposition to globalist supranational institutions, hostility to China as a civilizational enemy, a seething vendetta against so-called woke elites in cultural, academic, economic, and governmental institutions, a fuzzy, ill-defined economic populism, and an increasing willingness to get comfortable, as thought leader David Dreyer puts it, after the conference using state power to achieve conservative ends. So I want to break that down a little bit on a list, so let's think about it. A near-total moratorium on immigration, Christian nationalism to dominate the public square, rollback of LGBTQ rights, economic nationalism in opposition to globalist supranational institutions, hostility to China as a civilizational enemy, vendetta against woke elites and cultural, academic, economic, and governmental institutions, economic populism, and using state power to achieve conservative ends. Now, it seems to me that our NatCon friends have defined liberalism for us, at least the liberalism that needs defending at the moment. If this hits you in the gut as well as the head, you too may be on your way to an embodied humanism that Drew will be talking about at 12:15 today. And I hope it does hit you in the gut. The conference featured the Heritage Foundation, many of you know about that one, and speakers such as Ron DeSantis, Josh Hawley, Marco Rubio, and Rick Scott. One of the Gen Z participants summarized their goal this way: President Trump got elected on a platform of American greatness anew, but was unable to implement it because he didn't have the people he needed to staff the political bureaucracy and get things done. That will never happen again. My friends and allies will spend every last moment of our energy ensuring that. End quote. So, that's liberalism, right? Defined in its negative form. Let's think a little bit about what it is in a more abstract way. Now, I want to look at the online etymology dictionary. Yes, it's one of my favorites. You know that. I'm an old English professor. Latin liberalis meant noble, gracious, munificent, generous, literally of freedom, pertaining to or benefiting a free person, from liber, free, unrestricted, unimpeded, unbridled, unchecked, and licentious. And you see how it gets into different definitions of liberalism pretty darn quickly there. In the mid-14th century, generous is what it meant, but you had to be nobly born in order to be liberal, because, of course, the rest of us didn't have anything to give away anyway. Liberal was used in the 16th and 17th century as a term of reproach with the meaning free from restraint in speech or action. And again, you see how this idea continues to rotate around with time. The Enlightenment revived it in a positive sense, free from prejudice, tolerant, not bigoted or narrow. And that emerged in the revolutionary period in the US and then in France. And in the 19th century, often theological rather than political. opposed to orthodoxy. And that was used of Unitarians, Universalists, and people like that. And yeah, we made it into the dictionary, yay. And if you are a Unitarian, a Universalist, or a humanist, you're a double liberal in some ways. You're really, really liberal. But notice the paradox that's built in from the beginning. Liberalism has an aristocratic whiff to it, all the way back. Now, that stays. And why is that? For one thing, being liberal requires a change in thinking, I think, that appears to be difficult for the human brain. Most of us liberals don't know when we did it. It wasn't exactly conscious as we began to change the way that we thought, but that's kind of what I want to think about for a few moments. Now, the 20th century German philosopher Martin Heidegger insisted that truth is not found but revealed. It's not found, but it's revealed. And that is a central liberal assumption, I would argue. For example, when Copernicus discovered that the earth rotates around the sun, that was revealed, right? Copernicus had not somehow messed with the heavens and forced the earth to circle the sun. It had always been that way. The truth was discovered, it was revealed to humanity, and some of humanity accepted this as a new revealed truth, and some of humanity did not. Martin Heidegger argued that the same is true for all truth, from facts such as the nature of the universe to socially constructed truths like what is justice. For example, the truth that males and females are equally suited to be fully functional citizens of a nation is a truth discovered by some societies, and, as we know from the news, not by others. Now, the evidence is overwhelming, but the revealed truth must be accepted. Yes, I consciously say that's the truth. European philosophers of the 1600s and 1700s came to the conclusion that each of us can be easily fooled by what we think we see. Each of us is fallible. We're easily confused. Not only can our senses be fooled, but also our subjective social location can fool us into thinking particular things that simply are not true for a wider citizenry. That's the point I really want to underline today. It's axiomatic that having the courage of our convictions is a moral good. That's a good thing. However, having the courage of our confusions, I think, is a moral good as well. As a matter of fact, I think that the courage of our confusions, admitting that we are confused and accepting confusion as part of being alive, is central to liberalism. Whatever we think of John Locke and others from the European Enlightenment, what they discovered is a truth, that truth is often debatable. For example, the Roman Catholic Church had declared that the Mediterranean Sea, you get the name, media, middle, terra, earth, that the Mediterranean Sea was the center of the earth. But evidence to the contrary began to appear. Human beings discovered that the declared and enforced truth concerning the Mediterranean was actually not the truth at all. You see how that works. The British Enlightenment philosopher John Locke said this: false and doubtful positions relied upon as unquestionable maxims keep those who build on them in the dark from truth. Such are usually the prejudices imbibed from education, party, reverence, fashion, interest, etc. And that's a pretty good list of how we mess up, isn't it? We have our education, we have our party affiliations, we have what we reverence, we have the fashions of our time, we have our self-interest, etc. Right? And so I invite me and you and everybody to take a real long look at that kind of list. Education, party affiliations, reverence, fashion, self-interest, etc., prejudices imbibed, he called it. This is not a message for them, for other people. This is a warning for all of us to watch out for what we have been taught. Watch out for the truisms of our political parties. Watch out for religious assumptions. Watch out for the fashions of the time. Watch out for the intrusions of our own self-interest, etc. To be truly liberal, not merely liberal in name, we've got to watch our assumptions. We've got to embrace some, I guess I'm not sure about that. We've got to embrace some ambiguity and some confusion. Locke also said this: crooked things may be as stiff and unflexible as straight, and human beings may be as positive in error as in truth. Amen. The necessity of believing without knowledge, nay, often upon very slight grounds, in this fleeting state of action and blindness we are in, should make us more busy and careful to inform ourselves than to constrain others. Let me read that one again. The necessity of believing without knowledge, nay, often upon very slight grounds, in this fleeting state of action and blindness we are in, should make us more busy and careful to inform ourselves than constrain others. That is the condition of life itself. I would happen to agree with John Locke about that. We exist in a fleeting state of action and blindness, and we are faced with the necessity of believing without knowledge, nay, often upon very slight grounds. In this situation, Locke suggests that we be more busy and careful to inform ourselves than to constrain others. Learn about it yourself rather than worrying about those people. Oh, that we would all listen to those wise words. And yes, John Locke himself should have listened to his own advice rather than pontificating about slavery and private property and several other things he makes a fool of himself about, right? Because he too was living in a fleeting state of action and blindness. We all do. That is the wisdom we need to learn. We're here and we don't know everything. Yet, let's hear the wisdom that Locke has for us and ignore some of the really dumb things he said. He also said, truth scarce ever yet carried it by vote anywhere at its first appearance. New opinions are always suspected and usually opposed without any other reason but because they are not already common. Now, that is a very liberal sort of statement. Even progressive, I would say. And all the above also apply. All the things that we human beings get lost in our subjectivity and our prejudices. Now, in 2 weeks, I want to talk about that a little bit more and bring in our own congregational covenant and the FUS board covenant. If you haven't been on the board, you may not know that FUS board has a covenant, but they do, and it's a very liberal document because it makes room for new ideas, liberal ideas, confusion, and variations of opinion. Until then, and circling back for the moment of clarity that hit Mr. John Stuart Mill, I want to leave you with this. Now, telos, T-E-L-O-L, as a Greek word that means an end or a goal, all right? He's also a DC comic book character, but he's a very ambiguous guy, actually. So we'll ignore him and go to John Stuart Mill instead and his questioning of his own clarity. Now, Mill knew that liberalism is committed to a forever struggle for equality and tolerance and dare I say, just basic fairness. Mill knew that, given the realities of human frailty, justice will never be achieved in this world. However, John Stuart Mill saw long ago that we must commit to the goal the telic, T-E-L-I-C, the telic, because what our communities and our nation and our world need is clear. We need justice and harmony. We have to work for that. Yet this struggle is not enough to achieve the good life, happiness, what we ourselves need. Each of us, as fragile, finite human beings, well, we need an a-telic, a not-telic, a beside the point, if you will, but a point kind of nonetheless. It's one of those kind of confused things. The meaning and purpose of our lives is working for our ideals, our liberal ideals. However, like John Stuart Mill, we must realize that ultimately human nature itself intrudes. We are just people. Human nature messes up the plot every darn time. It messes up ultimate goals every darn time. Ultimately, we are not machines designed to achieve the goals we dream of. Yes, our dreams of a better world drive us on and give our lives meaning and purpose, but ultimately, we're human. We are exactly the sort of creatures who have always failed at creating those ideal visions of the world that we dream of. But you know what? That's okay. It's fine. It is our human reality. Mill then went a step further. Ultimately, he said, those only are happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. All right? Those are only happy who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. But it's not about fixing the world. Got to put those two things together. The goal of achieving our own happiness is exactly like the world peace achievement. It's not going to happen. It's unobtainable. So you begin to get the point. The people we love, the people who love us, our pets and our house plants and our gardens and the woods and the waters, what we're reading, or the music we love, these are all atelic. They're all beside the point in the larger pictures and pages of human history. Yet, they are the point all along. Mill offers this advice down through the years. Telic, atelic, we know that this struggle for justice is never ending. We will not cease working for justice. Yet, those things that appear to be atelic, beside the point, actually are the things that are the point. Living here, now, caring for those around us. Love is always the point.
Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.